Alright, so I went through every Vulengate sword and put them all into a tier list. Now the way that this is going to work is I'm going to rate the swords as they come right out of the box. No extra CEs or anything. Pretty self-explanatory, but before we start I would just like to remind you of a few things. I'm not the best at judging gear, and I made this all up on the spot, so please do take this list with a grain of salt, and it's all my opinion as well. And the resource pack I'm using I'll talk about once we hit 200 subscribers, which we are literally so close to. Just subscribe already if you haven't. And I won't waste your time, so let's get on with the tier list. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the tier list. Starting things off with a start here, the Hobo Blade. Now, everybody starts off with this sword, and, it's literally just a stone sword. There's nothing special about it other than the color code. It doesn't even have any lore or anything. It's literally just a stone sword. I didn't even make a texture for it. It's so insignificant. F tier. Alright, so moving on next, we got the Wild Long Sword. There is really nothing special about this sword that speaks up about itself. I mean, Sharp 5 doesn't even have Sharp 6. There's really basic enchants on here. Confusion, you could literally bypass that by just turning your distortion effects down to 0%. So, I mean, it's very clearly for new players, so I'm not going to hate on it too much. But nevertheless, it's not a good sword, so that's why it gets an E tier. Alright, so next up is the Gladiator Sword. Now, some might argue with me on this one, but I'm going to try to defend myself. We are rating these swords as they come. Straight out of the box, like no custom enchants that you add yourself or anything like that. So the Gladiator Sword, by itself, is kind of meh. Like, the 11 attack damage, like, okay, sure, it does more damage than your average great sword, great sword, but I mean, it doesn't really do anything other than that that's, you know, really fancy or anything. So, honestly, I'm just gonna have to give this a mid-tier. This is honestly a C tier. I'm gonna give it some points for having sharpness 7, but other than that, it's not that great. Alright, next up on the list is the Bramble Sword. This thing is a joke. Like, how am I supposed to take a sword like this seriously? I need to get up for this. First of all, it's a stone sword. Do I really need to say anything more? Really, the only thing that kind of appeals to me about this sword is the strength. That's it. Nothing else. It doesn't even do as much damage as a Wild Long Sword. Maybe do a little bit more damage because of the strength, but it's so bad. It has thorns on it, for Christ's sake. What am I supposed to do with thorns on a sword? I guess unless you're a donor and you can wear the sword as a hat, then maybe I can see where the thorns would come in, but it's terrible. There's nothing good about this sword. It's garbage. Okay, what was the Great Team smoking when they came up with this sword and they thought, yes, this is a good sword that people will actually use? I'm kidding, they didn't actually think that. There's no way somebody saw this sword and thought this is a good sword to put in the woodland crate. This sword is a joke. That's an easy F tier. Okay, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but it's honestly just so garbage. Okay, let's move on. So next up we have the Sky Sword. Now I gotta be honest, the custom enchants on this sword are kinda decent. They're not that bad. The only thing I don't like about it, Sharp 5. Why does it have Sharp 5? Almost every other great sword in here, skipping the Constellation Sword, has Sharp 6 on it. Why does this one have Sharp 5? Now the Decapitation 3, the Rage 4, and the Thunder 3, that's not bad. That's alright. The Sharp 5, oof. I think this sword has landed a C tier. Nothing really special about it. Sharp 5, but the C's are alright. C tier. So next up on the list is Judith's Blade from the Renaissance crate. Now this is actually a kinda decent sword. It's better than the Sky crate in my opinion. It's got Decapitation 4, Bleed 1, and Crit Hit 1. Okay, the CEs could be better, but those are pretty good CEs even by themselves. That's a good sword if you like grinding. Overall, kinda decent. It's not that good. I think I'm going to give this one another C tier, because it's not amazing. Judith's Blade are right up there with the Sky and the Glad Sword. Next up, we have the 2022 Anniversary. Now, this is basically the better version of Judith's Blade. It has Bleed 2 and Critical Hit 1, instead of Bleed 1 and Critical Hit 1. Reforged 3 instead of Decap 4. It's just a better Judith's Blade. So I think it's going to get 1 tier above the Judith's Blade. Pinata Stick, B tier. Alright, so next up is the Dorado Sword. Now, other than the Sharp 5, the enchants are actually pretty okay. Looting 4, you know, getting good grinding sword. Sharp 5, hurts a little bit to look at that, but I can forgive it. Forge 3, Bleed 3, and Execute 1, that's an alright sword. The only thing that's kind of killing it for me is the Sharp 5. But I think it's gonna get a B tier because of Bleed 3 and Execute 1. Right up there with the Pinata Stick. So we got Frostbite, Band of Arthropods 6, Knockback 3, Sharp 6, Smite 5, Ice Aspect 4, Levitating Blow 3. Now this is kind of a relative sword. I feel like Ice Aspect 4 and Levitating Blow 3, this is alright. This is an alright sword. It's not that good, but it's alright. I think I'll give it another A tier, because the enchants are alright. Because those are some higher tier enchants and they're pretty high level, so not that bad. Alright, so next up we got the Energy Sword, the Plasma Blade from the Futuristic crate. I'm not gonna lie, this is actually pretty good. Thunder 3 and Strength 1, yes. I'd use this sword. I think that's an A tier. I like it. Alright, so moving on to Autumn Wind from the Fall crate. Okay, so something I immediately noticed with this sword, it's a pretty good grinding sword. Because look at that. Lucky 5, Looting 4, and Sharp 6. That's the recipe for a good grinding sword. All in all, pretty good stuff. I think that's a pretty good B tier. Alright, so moving on to the Handmade Machete from the Apocalyptic crate. There's nothing crazy about this sword. Obliterate 3, I guess, but you might as well just use a voter stick. The haste is alright, but I think this is a C tier sword. It's not amazing. The Toy Sword from the Carnival crate. Lucky 5, Rage 4, Levitating Blow 3. I like those C's. And the Looting 4, I think that's a pretty good B tier. The Fencing Saber from the Olympic crate. This is an iron sword, and there's nothing really special about it. Now, I guess this is kind of cool for collectors, as all these swords are, but since it's an iron sword, it's not that good. It just isn't. Lucky 5 and Levitating Blow 3 are alright, but everything else doesn't really make up for it. Looting 4, yeah, you might argue that Looting 4 is alright, but just use a different Looting 4 sword. There's a lot out there. I think that's gonna have to get a D tier. It's not quite as bad as the Wild Longsword, but it's also not that good. Actually, is it better than the Wild Longsword? Looking at the CEs, it's a little bit better than the Wild Longsword, in my opinion. Actually, no, I think they're kind of similar. No, I'm putting the Fencing Saber down with the Wild Longsword. They're honestly kind of similar. So right next to each other. Now we got the Bolo Knife from the Farmer crate. The Execute 2 and Ice Aspect 3 makes it all around pretty decent. Knockback 2 and Fire Aspect 2 as well. Because of Ice Aspect 3 and Execute 2, I'd say that's an alright B tier. Alright, next up is the Unicorn Horn from the Fantasy crate. The only thing that really makes up for this one is Crit Hit 2. Confusion 4, that's kind of useless if your opponent, again, turned down their distortion effects. Decap 3, there's better decap swords. This one isn't that good, but the critical hit 2 makes it kind of alright, but still not that good. Definitely a D tier. I'm just not feeling this one. Next up is a Caveman Club from the Prehistoric crate. But this one's okay, it's got Fire Aspect 4, which is pretty quirky, pretty average. The Weakening Blow does make it alright. I think it's on the same level as whatever the Bolo Knife is. Next up, we got the Guan Dao. Now, things are actually looking pretty good here. This is actually pretty decent. I'd say this is an A tier. Because of Life Steal 2 and Strength 1. And along with Decap 3. That's pretty good. I think that's an alright A tier. Let's just go with A tier. Alright, next up is the Glow Stick from the Retro crate. Fire Aspect 4, Looting 4, Sharp 6, Smite 6, and Breaking 5, Decap 3, Bleed 2, and Execute 2. That's a good sword. Compared to all the other ones, that's a good sword. I don't know, is that an S tier? I think that's a good S tier. You know what? Screw it, S tier. I think that's a good S. That's an S tier. All right, next up we got the Windbreaker. It's not that good. No, it's not that good. I think I'd honestly give this a D tier. It's just not that good, honestly. Next up is the Heavy Metal Sword from the Musical crate. Well, this one's alright. It's got Poison 3 and Ice Aspect 3, along with Strength 1. That's a pretty good CE combination, so I give that's an A tier. I like that. Just gonna try to speed through these now. Next we got the Obsidian Executioner. Again, that's pretty good. I like that. I'd give that a solid A tier. I like that sword. Heat Stroke. The Wither 3 makes that pretty good. And the Crit Hit 2 as well. I think that's a solid-ish B tier because, it's alright. Alright, so next up is a Sword of Triton from the Pirate crate. Yeah, no, it's not that special. I think that's definitely a D tier. Strength 1, then that's kind of all that makes up for it. Lucky 2, I guess, but Strength 1, no, that's definitely an E tier. It's not that good. Alright, so next up we got the Conqueror Sword. A Strength 1 and Bleed 3 combination. That's a pretty good combination, I'm not gonna lie. But other than that, it's not that special. I'll give that a C tier. Okay, so now I got the Amethyst Sword. This is easily an F tier. Like, I mean, come on. It's a Glad Sword, but worse. That's what it is. It has no custom enchants on it. It's not good. No, nobody likes the Crystal Crate. Nobody likes the Crystal Crate. Maybe it's a little bit better than these two, but I'm still gonna put it down with them. Because it honestly doesn't deserve any higher spot. It doesn't deserve to be up with these, because it's just simply not as good as these three. Get down there. Alright, so next we got the Stinger from the Spring Crate. This is a pretty good grinding sword, so I'd say the only thing the sword is really good for is grinding, but that's about it. So for that, I'm gonna give it a C tier. Alright, next up is a Champagne Saber from the 2022 anniversary. I'm not gonna lie, this sword's actually pretty decent. Critical hit 3, poison 3, and lifesteal 3. Those are all pretty decent enchants when you combine them together. Actually, I think this sword is better than the glow stick. Fight me! Champagne Saber is an S tier. That is a good sword. We have the Serrated Saber from the Steampunk Crate. Bleed 3, haste 1, and weakening blow 3. That's pretty decent. I'd give that an A tier. It gets an A tier mostly because of the Bleed 3, the Haste 1, and the Weakening Blow 3, and the Looting 4. That's a pretty good combination of stuff. Next up is the Cookie Sword from the Festive Crate. This sword's not that great. I mean, slow 5 and ice aspect 5, that's cool, I guess. I guess it's kind of cool if you like slowing your enemies down, but other than that, it's not that great. Honestly, just lands another C tier. I can't really decide. Next up is a Mahogany Sword from the Overgrown Crate. There's a lot of enchants on this sword. I think the Overgrown Crate is actually a pretty underrated crate. Look at that. Strength 1, Execute 4, Levitating Blow 2. The Slow 5 and Reforged 3 are kind of meh, but those are pretty good enchants, I'm not gonna lie. I like that. I'm gonna give that an A tier. Alright, next up is a Spooky Crate with Agony. I like the name. Lifesteal 3, Wither 3, Poison 5, and Rage 3. Holy crap, that's a good sword. That's an easy S tier. I didn't realize how good that sword is, but that's a really good sword. That outclasses every single other sword on this S tier. Holy. So next up we have the Hanzo Masamune. I really hope I pronounced that right. From the Dynasty Crate. If you look at other swords, this thing actually does more damage than a diamond sword with sharp 6 on it. It does 11 attack damage while all the other ones did 10.5. Yes, it may be an iron sword, but Ice Aspect 3, Decap 5, Haste 2, and Critical Hit 3. Think about that. The only thing this sword doesn't have going for it is that it's iron. I'm gonna be honest. I think this sword is an A tier, despite it being iron, because those are some pretty good enchants. And that's my final verdict. So next up is a Toxic Sword from the Radioactive Crate. Wither 3, Slow 3, Lucky 3, Hunger 2. The only enchant on there that's kind of decent is Wither 3, but everything else is pretty meh. No, I definitely think that's a D tier. Because Wither 3, that's pretty good, but all the other enchants don't really make up for it. D tier for the Toxic Sword. Okay, now the one that everybody's been waiting for. The Sword of Peleus. I mean, come on. Looting 5. It's the only sword on the server with Looting 5. I mean, come on. Lifesteal 3, Strength 1, Poison 4, Weakening Blow 4, S tier. Looting 5. Looting 5. This is every Vulengate player's dream sword, especially the ones that have a creeper farmer. I think we all knew that the Sword of Peleus was gonna get an S tier. Alright, next up is the Bowie Knife from the Wild West Crate. Bleed 3, Slow 3, Critical Hit 3, and Haste 1. Pretty good. All around solid sword. I think it's in an A tier. No, B tier. I've changed my mind. B tier. It's not that good. Alright, so next up is Blackbeard's Cutlass from the Depth Crate. Left-hand Blow 3, Ice Aspect 3, Lifesteal 3, and Blind 5. That's pretty good in a combination. I'd give that an A tier. Pretty good. Next up is Easter's Wrath from the Easter Crate. Thunder 3, Strength 1, Slow 4, Wither 4. The Wither 4, the Strength 1, and the Thunder 3 really make it for me. But the lack of other vanilla enchants kind of makes it eh. Really feeling a B tier on this one. Assassin's Blade with Sharp 6, Smite 6, Shadow Step 3, Poison 3, Execute 3, and Reforged 3. This is the only sword in the server that has Shadow Step on it. There's only one other way on the server to get Shadow Step, and that's with Houdini from the what is it? The Carnival crate. You can't get Shadow Step from the Gladiator crate. I don't know why. I don't think anybody knows why. But just because of that alone, and the other enchants on it, I think this is gonna have to get an S tier. Alright, next up is the Heart Extractor from the Love crate. Wither 3 and Lifesteal 2 is alright, and everything else is kinda C tier, I reckon. Almost done here. Let's take a look. Ashino's Great Sword. Sharp 6, Decap 3, Poison 3, Haste 2, Critical Hit 3, Reforged 3. Okay, wow. Poison 3, the Haste 2, the Critical Hit 3, and the Decap 3 make it pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. I think that's gonna get it an A tier, not gonna lie. Next up is the Sword of Eternal Frost from the Glacial crate. Slowness 3, Ice Aspect 2, Blind 2, and Reforged 3. That's not great, I'm not gonna lie. This sword is really good if you like slowing your enemies down, but otherwise I think that's an E tier. Next up is a Peppermint Sword. Sharp 6, Lifesteal 2, Critical Hit 2, and I mean, it's not that special. We're getting to the section where the swords aren't that good, because I guess the standards are a bit lower in the old Vulengate phase, but I mean, compared to every other sword we've had on here, it's not that special. I think that's a D tier. Alright, next up is Cornucopia's Sword with Confusion 3, Blind 3, Lucky 2, and Reforged 3. It's not that good. Nah, that's an E tier. Next up is a Galaxy Cleaver, and holy, look at all those enchants. Ice Aspect 2, Knockback 2, Looting 3, Sharp 6, Smite 5, Sweeping Edge 3, Unbreaking 5, Wither 3, Decapitation 3, Haste 1, and Reforged 3. That's a lot of enchants. But a lot of them are vanilla. I think this is honestly B tier. It's alright. Compared to all the other swords we've had, like, I'd say this is on par with some of the more modern swords that we have. I think I'd give it a B tier. Alright, nearing the end here, we got Excalibur. Not great. I have to give it a C. Alright, Hawaiian Crate doesn't even have a sword, so we're skipping that one. Tut's Royal Sword. Fire Aspect 2. Knockback 3, Looting 3, Sharp 5, Smite 4, Sweeping Edge 3. That's not a good sword. Sharp 5, really? Yeah, no, that's an E tier. Now, I'm not sure if this one is an E tier or an F tier, because it's not quite as bad as these. It's also not really as good as these either. I think I'm gonna put it right between E and F right here. There we go. Got Old Wild Crate. Oh, I already know this is gonna be garbage. Yeah, that's F. Okay, since these are kind of the same texture, I'm just gonna go ahead and add some text here. Make that a bit smaller. There we go. Now it's very clear that's the old Wild Longsword. Oh, hey, look at that. We're done with all the crates and it only took me 50 minutes. If you made it to the end, you have a lot of patience. So that was my Vulengate sword tier list. Remember that this is all my opinion, and looking back on it a day later, there's definitely some swords I disagree with, but most of them I still agree with, so that's good. Now I'm gonna leave the actual tier list in the description if you want to look at it or anything like that. But we are really close to 200 subscribers, and I'm gonna talk about the resource pack I was using once we hit 200 subscribers. So do it. We are literally so close. Like, oh my god, subscribe already if you haven't. I'm begging you. Yes, this is a threat. Yeah, that's about it. I can't do outros, so I'll see you in the next video.